Hello and welcome to It's a Code You, mental health support for those working in healthcare. This is a podcast created for healthcare employees to explore not only issues relating to mental and emotional health, but also unique challenges that those working in healthcare are faced with. Your hosts are Adina Tucker, a licensed clinical social worker with Dartmouth Health, and Jennifer Hinsey, an MSW also with Dartmouth Health. Hi, and welcome to It's a Code You. In this episode, we are going to be giving you some practical, actionable skill building information. And the skill is around the catch it, check it, change it reflex tool. This is really a tool that can help shift your thinking from being distorted and skewed in one way to a more balanced, accurate thought. And it's a way to see if your thoughts are out of balance and getting them back to being more balanced and more nuanced. And this particular tool is part of a larger therapy model called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And the purpose of CBT is really to stop negative thought patterns and patterns of behavior that might be impacting you and your life in a way that's really counterproductive to your goals and wishes. So, first, we'll give a little bit of information about CBT, and then we'll dive into the catch it, check it, change it tool.
Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, as it's called, it's a widely used form of psychotherapy, and it's also very well studied. Lots of evidence based research around this treatment used for a very long time. So, CBT, it's been around for a really long time, since the 50s and 60s, when the modern, I guess you could say, theory has been implemented. But the treatment does vary a little bit. It can be different depending on what issue you're trying to address. But basically, the overall idea is that at baseline, what we think, how we behave, and how other people make us feel are all very related, and all of those things affect our overall well being. So, the idea behind it is to both recognize and then change the distressing beliefs that we carry. And it also helps teach people to replace the distressing thought patterns with ones that are less distressing. We could even call it more balanced. Now, why is this helpful? Well, it can provide us with some clarity about our thoughts, the way we think about situations, the way we think about ourselves, even. And this is important because distressing or harmful thought patterns or behaviors can make us feel really bad about ourselves. CBT is great to be used for treating depression, anxiety, OCD, and even different forms of addiction. You do have to be willing to put in effort and to be honest with yourself and your therapist too. And the basic idea, just to bring it back around, is that again, focusing to change the automatic negative thoughts that we can have that contribute to our anxiety and depression.
Okay, so now let's talk about the catch it, check it, change it intervention. So I'm going to go through what each of the C's stand for and break down what they each mean. So the first C is catch it, and that involves identifying a negative or distressing thought as it comes up. This can look like self-criticism or pessimism, and you can do this by practicing mindfulness, which we've covered and have a couple of episodes on that you can listen to if you want to go a little more in depth, and also by really developing your self awareness. So, when you're able to be more mindful and self aware, you can become more in tune with yourself and catch these distressing thoughts as they come up, which then brings us to the second C, which is check it. So, you recognize that, oh, wait a minute, that's a negative thought about myself. And so, this is where you put in that pause and you think, okay, let's see if this is actually valid. What logical evidence is there for the thought being a valid one? And by examining these thoughts and really looking to see if they are valid and true, it also helps to see where the cracks are in the reasoning behind having the thoughts. So it can also help you get ready to reframe it into something more useful. And the third C is change it. So we've recognized a negative thought, we've examined it, and now we need to replace it with something that focuses on our strengths, something that's more positive and more balanced?
So, here are some ways that you can practice the three C's. So, let's start with catch it. Well, we can catch by practicing mindfulness activities like journaling and meditation, and even just keeping a thought diary where you track any negative thought patterns. That's helpful too, because it can help you see what tends to cause those negative thoughts to pop up. Now, checking it. So, this can involve asking yourself probing questions. And of course, working with a therapist can be very helpful in mastering and practicing the skill, but we'll do a quick example that you could probably do on your own. So let's say your coworker came into the office and walked by you and was visibly annoyed. Your automatic thought is that you've done something or said something wrong, and now this person is mad at you. So let's take that thought. My coworker is mad at me because I've done something wrong. I would challenge you to think about other reasons why your coworker might seem annoyed. Do they have a big project? Do they have a busy day? Maybe they have a lot going on at home. And you could always ask, hey, I just want to check in with you and make sure you're doing okay. But considering other options or facts for something being what it is, that is what is key to checking the thought for validity. We're considering other options. Now, changing it. To help you practice replacing those negative or distressing thought patterns, you can do things like positive affirmations, maybe some visualization techniques. The goal here is to shift the focus to something that's positive about yourself or the situation. Now, let's go over the three C's more broadly to further explain it. And we'll put a link to a really helpful exercise sheet that we're using just in case you want to try it out for yourself. First, you catch by noticing the distressing or negative thought and ask, what is my brain getting caught up in? Or what is it saying to me? Then you check it. Ask yourself, is this a realistic thought? Is there concrete evidence for this thought? Is it logical? Does it actually make sense? Is it a helpful thought? And then there are a list of thinking traps that trip us up that we can check. And we can ask ourselves, am I doing any of these?
So here are the different thinking traps that we can fall into. And the first one is catastrophizing. And another way, especially if you're working with kids or talking to your kids about some of these things, you could also call it awfulizing. That's what a child therapist used once, and I thought that was really good. But basically, the whole idea behind this thinking trap is that you exaggerate the potential negative consequence of a situation or event, believing that the worst outcome will occur. And it could even go further to, especially if you want to think about in terms of a child, example would be like, well, I've lost my ability to play video games because I'm in trouble. And I was supposed to get online and play with my friend at 4 o'clock. And so now I'm not going to get to play with my friend. And I'm probably never going to get to play with my friend again because then they're going to be mad at me. And you just down and down and down and keep down the road with really exaggerating how negative that's going to be. Another thinking trap is polarized thinking. And so that's the everything is black and white. It's either good or bad. There's no in between. It can also be referred to as all or nothing thinking. And that can lead to rigid opinions and judgments. And it can really limit your ability to see the complexity and nuances of situations. Another thinking trap is overgeneralizing, and that's making a broad assumption about something with limited experience. So, an example could be maybe you had a job interview and you didn't get that job. And so then you think, well, I'm never going to get a job. I'm going to fail at everything. So, it's sounds a little simpler to catastrophizing, but it's slightly different. A negative filter is another thinking pattern, and that's basically you only pay attention to the bad things that happen and you ignore all the good things. It's really that really heavy pessimism for negative filter. The next thinking trap is jumping to conclusions, and it probably doesn't require any explanation, but it's basically making assumptions about a situation based on limited information. And those conclusions are usually negative conclusions. Mind reading I feel like this is one that can happen a lot in relationships with others, especially romantic partner. Do you assume you know what someone else is thinking or feeling instead of asking and you just decide that's what it is? That can be really limiting and also cause you to especially assume that it's something negative about you. Another thinking trap is emotional reasoning. And so that's when you use those emotions to make decisions or draw conclusions without considering the facts. So it takes the rationality out of it. And that's what can also lead to that kind of negative self-thought. The next thinking trap is musts or shoulds. So that's when you put excessive pressure on yourself by believing that you must or should do something in a certain way. And so then that kind of very rigid belief with that pressure can lead us to having feelings of guilt or anxiety for not measuring up or doing something in this way that we've told ourselves we should. Another thinking trap is labeling, and that's a type of extreme overgeneralization involving judging or defining someone by a singular event or behavior. So, calling yourself a failure after you make one mistake, or deciding someone is a jerk after having one bad encounter with them. And the last thinking trap is blaming. So that's when someone attributes their negative feelings, experiences, or failures or to external factors or others rather than taking responsibility for their own actions and circumstances.
Let's take a thought and practice changing it. Now, if you are listening and you're willing and open to try this, here's a great opportunity. We'll walk you through it. Bring up a thought, perhaps one that you recently had, a problematic thought, some kind of negative thought, and or maybe one you've had in the past, any thought, any negative thought, perhaps. But hold it in your mind, and now this is what you're going to ask yourself. What is a more realistic, logical, and helpful way of thinking about this? How will thinking this way help me to act in accordance with my values and goals? And finally, am I willing to let go of the struggle with the negative thought in the service of focusing on what really counts? Now, we'd like to share that this does take practice, all right? And if this felt difficult for you as you questioned that problematic negative thought you brought up in your mind, well, remember, what we are actually aiming to do is to create a pause between the automatic thoughts that have become a habit and to say, let's just wait a minute. Let's just stop and look at this. And it takes practice to build new skills. What we say to ourselves matters. The negative self talk increases anxiety and depression symptoms and just perpetuates the negative and distressing cycle. Our goal is to stop the cycle by first inserting just a small pause in between those automatic thoughts to provide room for reconsideration and some reframing.
This is something I don't know about you, but this is something that I use a lot, especially with my anxious folks in therapy, because I feel very strongly that if you can identify
Mm,
what the negative thought is, and sometimes it's like a core kind of negative cognition, like I'm not good enough or I'm unlovable or whatever it is. But if you can identify that and then notice when those thoughts related to that are
yeah.
popping up, that can really put things on the road to change.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just slowing down a little bit, right? Because those automatic thoughts can appear at lightning speed, right? So just giving yourself time to slow down and really apply some rationale, some deeper thought about why has this thought come up? What story are we telling ourselves through this thought? Yeah.
So, this episode, we have gone over the skill catch it, check it, and change it, and really talked about how to do that, different ways that you can start slowing down and catching those things to help with some of these negative perceptions we have and try to help with some of our anxiety and depressive symptoms. So give it a shot. Let us, if you do, let us know. You can, if you, or alternatively, if you have any feedback or questions, or there's something that you would like us to talk about, you can email us at dhbhs.media at hitchcock.org. And if you haven't left us a rating and review and you like what you hear, please do that. And if you like what you're hearing and you know someone who would like to listen, share that with them. But we really appreciate you listening.